Where are all the slave ships? I mean, they have every other type of ship in a museum, so why don't we have any museums with slave ships in them? Yeah, I remember when people were making this argument at the beginning of the pandemic. Now, I didn't have a following back then, so I didn't want to bring it up. And after the way y'all decided to tussle with me over Dr. CB, I just figured we wait till the end of Black History Month for this. But it's March 1st, and I chose violence. So, with love and light, here's the answer. And we're going to combine some history, some context, and some common sense. So, here we go. The short answer is that slave ships weren't built to last 500 years, nor were they preserved once they were retired. Because by that time, the folks who were importing slaves found something else to import. So there are people who are using this as evidence that the transatlantic slave trade didn't happen. And that's just not true. The Middle Passage is very well documented. And if we're thinking in history in terms of the U.S., the last known slave ship to import Africans to America for the purpose of chattel slavery docked in 1860, and it was called the Clotilda. Now, we know that emancipation happened within 10 years of the Clotilda docking, but there's something that happened in 1808, about 60 years prior, that a lot of people don't know about. And that's called the Act Prohibiting the Importation of Slaves. Now, that act was passed in 1808. And what happened essentially was at the Constitutional Convention, the Founding Fathers argued about slavery the way that they've been arguing about slavery since the American Revolution. And the compromise they came to was that the North was like, okay, South, y'all can keep your slaves that you already have, but you can't import any new ones. But Cheyenne, you just said the Clotilda docked in 1860. Y'all, they were sneaking us in. Now we know if there's one thing history's taught us, it's that white folks don't like the government messing with their money. And there were whole companies who did nothing but import human chattel. So you think they just stopped overnight? No. They continued. They continued to import human chattel and use the guise of those other goods that they were shipping as cover. And it's very well documented. I implore you to go look it up. But essentially what would happen was, if those ships were found off the coast of the USA and they had slaves on them, what they would do was set the ship on fire and let it burn. Or they'd chain up all the Africans and literally push them off the side so they drowned by the time they got to shore. And they just figured, screw it, we'll just take the loss. And if you look at records from that time, you'll see that a lot of them are incomplete or written in code. And if that sounds absolutely horrific, it's because it was. If you get a chance, I recommend reading this book. It's Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston. The foreword is by Alex Walker. It's a great book. But it tells of the story of the last black cargo in his own words, in Cujo's own words. But yeah, those ships simply weren't saved because they weren't deemed as important enough to save. And the companies and agencies that use them just use them for other stuff or docked them and let them rot away. If you want more information, the Smithsonian is actually conducting a project. It's called the Slave Wrecks Project, where they go try and look for those boats. But yeah, that's what happened. But there's something that happened in 1808, about 60 years prior, that a lot of people don't know about. And that's called the Act Prohibiting the Importation of Slaves. Now, that act was passed in 1808. And what happened essentially was at the Constitutional Convention, the Founding Fathers argued about slavery the way that they've been arguing about slavery since the American Revolution. And the compromise they came to was that the North was like, okay, South, y'all can keep your slaves that you already have, but you can't import any new ones. But Cheyenne, you just said the Clotilda docked in 1860. Y'all, they were sneaking us in.